Somewhere between insanity and brilliance lies a decision that sounds absolutely ridiculous until it works. In 1973, a small island community faced complete annihilation from a river of molten rock flowing toward their only harbor. Engineers and officials gathered for an emergency meeting and proposed something that had never been attempted at this scale before: dumping nearly 2 billion gallons of seawater directly onto an active volcano. Previous attempts in Hawaii and Italy had failed miserably. The scientific community was skeptical, but with their entire livelihood about to disappear under hundreds of feet of lava, the people of this remote Icelandic island decided to try the impossible. For 160 days, hundreds of volunteers battled temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit in a desperate gamble that defied every conventional approach to volcanic disasters. This is Iceland, a name that conjures images of frozen landscapes and Arctic winds. The country sits right beside the Arctic Circle, battered by relentless weather and covered in thick ice layers. But underneath that deceptively peaceful frozen surface lurk massive pockets of magma, because Iceland isn't just ice and snow. On a territory roughly the size of Kentucky, 130 volcanoes dot the landscape, both massive and small. More than 30 remain actively threatening today. While Americans worry about tornadoes and Japanese citizens prepare for earthquakes, Icelanders live with giant volcanoes literally in their backyard. Just 4.6 miles off Iceland's southern coast sits an island called Heimaey, measuring only about 5 square miles but serving as the largest island in the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago. Adjacent to this peaceful fishing community stands a volcano named Eldfell. For nearly 6,000 years, Eldfell had been classified as dormant, essentially asleep. But in the volatile world of volcanology, dormant never means safe, it simply means waiting. The fateful night arrived without much warning. On January 21, 1973, small tremors began rattling windows and shaking foundations. Locals barely noticed. Earthquakes are simply part of existence in Iceland, background noise in daily life. Then at 1:55 in the morning on January 23, a deafening explosion shattered the night silence. The ground cracked open just 650 feet from residential neighborhoods, close enough that people could see flames from their windows. Fire erupted with furious intensity as 40 massive lava fountains illuminated the sky in hellish orange and red. Within just 2 days, a cinder cone over 330 feet tall formed from absolutely nothing. Fast-flowing lava consumed everything in its path, erupting at a terrifying rate of 3,500 cubic feet per second, a genuine flood of fire. But fate granted Heimaey 2 miraculous advantages in those critical first hours. Unusual westerly winds blew toxic gases away from population centers rather than suffocating the town. And a recent storm had forced all fishing boats to shelter in the harbor, inadvertently creating a ready-made evacuation fleet. In less than 6 hours, over 5,000 residents were evacuated, leaving only a few hundred volunteers behind to fight the eruption. In the end, only 1 person died in the entire disaster. The survival rate was nothing short of miraculous. But while people could escape, the island of Heimaey had to absorb the volcano's full destructive force. Houses near the initial fissure were crushed by lava and superheated ash within minutes. In some areas, volcanic ash accumulated to 16 feet deep, like black snow falling from an apocalyptic sky. Over 400 houses were completely destroyed. Dozens more disappeared under thick ash layers. Lava bombs, glowing red rocks ejected from the volcano that arc through the air like deadly fireworks, rained down with enough force to incinerate entire structures on impact. The lava flow itself averaged more than 130 feet deep, reaching up to 330 feet in certain locations. It crushed even reinforced concrete storage tanks like they were made of cardboard. 1 fish processing factory was completely swallowed. 2 others burned to foundations. The power plant collapsed, plunging the island into darkness. Underwater, power cables and water pipes were severed, leaving Heimaey almost completely paralyzed. After the evacuation, approximately 250 volunteers remained behind. These weren't trained disaster professionals or military personnel. They were fishermen, laborers, and craftsmen. Initially, they shoveled ash off rooftops to prevent buildings from collapsing under the weight, boarded up windows against the toxic atmosphere, and moved precious belongings ahead of the advancing lava front. But soon both the volunteers and government authorities realized the true existential threat wasn't the ash or even the destroyed homes. It was the lava flow threatening to block Heimaey's harbor. The harbor represented the island's heart and economic lifeline. Hundreds of fishing boats operated from this port, collectively responsible for 3% of Iceland's entire gross domestic product. If the harbor became blocked by solidified lava, the country's vital fishing industry would face collapse. More importantly, the islanders would have no economic reason to return home. Their community would effectively cease to exist even if buildings remained standing. So what options existed? At this desperate moment, Icelandic officials and scientists conceived a plan so audacious it bordered on insane: use seawater to cool and stop the lava flow. The concept sounded absurd. How could streams of water possibly stand against an erupting volcano spewing molten rock at over 2,000 degrees? But it was literally the only viable option. Previous small-scale attempts had been made in Hawaii and at Mount Etna in Italy with limited success, mostly as scientific experiments rather than serious intervention strategies. This time, Iceland committed to executing the concept on a scale never before attempted. The plan involved deploying a network of high-powered pumps and pipes that would draw seawater directly from the ocean and blast it onto the leading edge of the lava flow. The numbers were staggering from the outset. Nearly 6.2 million tons of seawater would need to be sprayed continuously throughout the operation. So how did this impossible miracle actually work? The process sounds deceptively simple but produced incredible effects. When massive streams of seawater contacted flowing lava, the water instantly absorbed tremendous heat, boiled violently, and converted to steam. This process extracted enormous quantities of thermal energy from the lava, causing its surface to rapidly harden into solid rock. As the outer layer solidified while the interior remained molten, the lava became compressed and began bulging, which dramatically slowed its forward progress. Effectively, cool barriers formed inside the flow itself, blocking the advance of fire from within. Scientists call these structures internal lava dams, walls created directly inside the lava stream. But the effects didn't stop there. Because seawater rather than fresh water was used, when steam rose into the atmosphere, all the dissolved salt remained behind. The result was huge white patches appearing across the lava's surface, covering the blackened rock like snow on a dark ocean. Scientists estimate that after the operation concluded, approximately 220,000 tons of salt were deposited on the lava field. Here's a little-known detail that reveals just how extreme conditions became. So much steam rose from the operation that it created giant columns hundreds of feet high, completely obscuring visibility and forcing workers to labor inside a scalding fog. Temperatures near the active lava could reach 2,000 to 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel. Yet workers still had to approach close enough to install pipes and spray equipment. Once the lava cooling plan received official approval, the real battle commenced. In the early days, workers and volunteers sprayed seawater directly onto the leading edge of the advancing flow. Amazingly, effects were immediate and visible. The surface hardened, and forward progress slowed noticeably. But the sheer mass of lava was overwhelming. They clearly needed significantly more capacity. That's when a hero arrived in the form of the dredger Sandy. This specialized ship was repositioned to spray massive waterfalls of seawater directly from offshore positions onto the lava. Sandy managed to preserve portions of the harbor by slowing the advance. But even this industrial-scale intervention wasn't sufficient. To gain real advantage, teams built cooling walls directly at the lava's edge, monitored every movement around the clock, and deployed bulldozers to create additional barriers. The lava kept coming. By late March, nearly one-fifth of the town had been consumed. The small island was slowly vanishing. Then critical assistance arrived from across the Atlantic. 32 giant pumps shipped from the United States. Each could pump up to 264 gallons per second, enough to drain an Olympic swimming pool in mere minutes. When these industrial monsters began operating at full capacity, the lava's advance into populated areas began slowing, then finally stopped completely. But the battle wasn't over. The next phase of the plan was even more audacious, laying water pipes directly across the active lava field. Yes, you read that correctly. Bulldozers drove straight onto flowing lava. It sounds like Hollywood fiction, but the thick ash layer on the surface created an insulating thermal shield that allowed vehicles to cross. For the first time in recorded history, humans drove machinery over a river of fire. On steep sections where vehicles couldn't navigate, workers performed the task manually, dragging pipe sections and connecting them to harbor pumps while working in blinding steam. They employed both steel pipes and innovative plastic pipes with cooling water flowing through them, lighter and more heat-resistant, stretching 130 to 650 feet deep into the lava mass. Every time shifting lava broke a connection, they replaced it and continued pumping. After 15 continuous days of this brutal operation, nearly 132 million gallons of seawater had been poured onto the molten mass. And then the miracle manifested. A massive cooling wall successfully blocked the lava, forcing it to halt its advance. Looking back at the entire operation raises an important question. Why did the lava cooling strategy succeed spectacularly at Heimaey, while similar attempts elsewhere almost invariably failed? Several factors proved critical. First was proximity. The Eldfell fissure opened only about 6 miles from the town center and harbor. This geographical advantage allowed rescue teams to deploy rapidly and transport heavy equipment to the front lines immediately. If eruption had occurred in a remote mountain location like Etna, the battle would have ended before intervention could even begin. Second was lava velocity. Compared to Hawaiian and other volcanic eruptions, Eldfell's lava flowed relatively slowly. This deadly slowness provided precious time to strategize, install pumping systems, experiment with techniques, and make adjustments. Third was the ready seawater supply. This was Iceland's natural weapon. Teams simply ran pipes from the harbor and pumped directly onto lava without needing to transport fresh water from distant sources or worry about reserves depleting. Fourth was logistics and existing infrastructure. Despite being a small island nation, Iceland maintained well-developed road and maritime networks. Thanks to this infrastructure, bulldozers, pump ships, and all 32 high-capacity pumps from the United States reached the island in record time. After nearly 5 months of continuous operation, the volcano cooling campaign finally concluded. On July 10, 1973, the giant water cannons shut down. There was nothing left to spray. The Eldfell lava flow had stopped, and the volcano's eruptive phase had ended. The total amount of water pumped during this battle is staggering. 1.9 billion gallons of seawater, enough to fill more than 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, all deployed just to slow a single river of fire. The total material ejected by Eldfell was equally mind-blowing, approximately 8.8 billion cubic feet of lava and ash. Just the lava alone would be sufficient to rebuild all of Manhattan, with foundations dozens of feet deep, an almost incomprehensible volume. The entire lava cooling operation cost approximately $1,447,742, roughly $8 million in today's currency. That sounds expensive until you consider the alternative. If they'd done nothing, the lava could have flowed for another month, completely destroying Heimaey and blocking the harbor, erasing 3% of Iceland's GDP. From that perspective, it was an absolute bargain, an investment in survival. After the operation ended, Heimaey didn't just survive, it became a global sensation and tourist destination. Instead of transforming into a dead zone, the island boomed. People flocked to witness the town that survived hell, walking streets bordered by cooled lava flows turned to black rock, observing white salt layers covering surfaces. The entire area became a living natural museum documenting humanity's most successful battle against volcanic destruction. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.